takes forever, and so as a consequence, there's not a middle class that owns homes in many African countries because they can't get a mortgage. So somebody had the bright idea that maybe if the Overseas Private Investment Corporation spent some of its money, and it's not very much, helping private companies create a pool of money for mortgages, that would be a good thing. And lo and behold, in Zambia, there are now housing developments that are springing up in which people can get a mortgage, buy a house, not wait 10 years to build it level by level, move in, hold a mortgage, and create a middle-class community. Well, that's happening. But that's happening only because somebody said, well, this is a better use of a few $100 million of American money than just having an aid program might be. And that's the sort of thing that I think is possible. It probably requires breaking out of a lot of sort of old thought ways of doing business. So I guess my first answer to your question is, yeah, it's possible, but probably people need to think of new ways to do it.
I mean, the U.S., if I have this right, gives about less than 1% of its total GDP. I mean, in terms of real dollar terms, it's the most of any country in the world in terms of foreign assistance, but because we're so wealthy, it comes up to about, I think, 1% of GDP. Should that number be higher, or should it, as you're suggesting, just be sort of dispersed more smartly, essentially, that we need to come up with ways to not just throw hundreds of millions of dollars down the drain, but actually make a difference?
It could easily be both. I'm not sure those are mutually exclusive.
Is that 1% figure, if I have it right,
usually
is that too
between
low?
1 and 2%.
Between 1 and 2. Is that too low, do you think? Or?
Probably. Yeah, I think probably
David?
so. The problem with it is every American, in every survey, thinks about 19% of the federal budget goes to foreign aid. So that's the first thing you got to do is convince people that's not true.
Should be higher but dumber. Should be higher but spent worse. Yeah, no, I mean, the couple things to be said is, first, we spend a huge amount, unlike other countries, on private aid. If you add that in, you add up to a pretty decent amount. The second thing I noticed from people within the Bush administration is the thing they're proudest, and for some it's the only thing they're proud of, is the work they've done in Africa. I think Mark Dybel was here just a little while ago. They are super proud of that. We think with some justification. But again, that was a policy not designed to make America look good. It wasn't about us, it was about them. And in that way, it was successful. And what Jerry said, it's why I talked about Benjamin Franklin. It's creating the middle class institutions that, who cares what they think about us? But middle class, successful societies that hate us are a lot better than poor, unsuccessful societies that hate us. And therefore, that creating what the Benjamin Franklin values would be a banking system, fire departments, honest local governments, and especially education. If you look at society after society that got well educated, whether it's Chile or Japan or whatever, 30 years later, they became pretty good societies. And so to me, that's something we actually do reasonably well in some parts of our educational system, in particular our community college system. These are the American University in Beirut and other things. These are things we actually do quite well. And it seems to me that's should be a much higher priority than it's been.
And you're often educating the future leaders of these countries, right?
Yeah, for good and bad. I mean, most of the dictators around the world have been educated here as well, but at least they have good grammar.
Some in Britain.
Right. Walter, the aid question, more, dumber, smarter, different?
Well, the roots of the aid problem has always been to help us. I mean, we do it, and most of the aid programs go to a half dozen countries who are our strongest allies against whoever is the major threat at the time. It used to be Soviet Union, now it's terrorism. So that's where most of the money goes. What Jerry's talking about is a good idea, but there's so much fear that our money is not going to be used correctly. And what's happened also is that now you earmark money. I mean, a lot of the foreign aid bill that goes to smaller countries is earmarked. And the other part of the tricky part about American foreign aid is most of it has to go to American companies, so that we're really helping ourselves and kidding ourselves about what we're doing. And it is this whole idea of what we do is the right thing for you, rather than what do you need help in doing that you, the government that's there, or the people there want. And that's why Jerry's thing is so good. And so a lot of private NGOs are out around the world trying to help people. I can remember, and I think you have to keep in mind that foreign aid has been sold in part because the people running the appropriations committees, it's narrow as that, are people with very narrow vision. And so that I'm sort of on a kick now writing about how much of foreign aid is now being put through the Pentagon. Pentagon now, 5 years ago, had 7% of the foreign aid money. Now they have 20% of it.
If I can interrupt, is that a problem, and if so, why? If the money is still getting out there, does it matter who's channeling it?
Oh yeah, but what's it getting out there to do? That's the real problem. And what it's getting out there to do is help build up military, police departments, things like that. Police departments to fight internal problems. As David said, there is a terrible concern on the part of this government, and probably would have been earlier governments, and maybe a problem with future governments, that any ungoverned area is spawning like mosquitoes, terrorists, and those terrorists are going to come after us. One follows two, follows three. Not every terrorist wants to come after Americans. They generally want to go after their bad leaders. I always shock people. Go back and read Osama bin Laden's 1994 fatwa. It reads like a Declaration of Independence from the royal family. It goes down the list of all the ills of the royal family. We don't like the way he's going about doing it, and I certainly agree with that. But essentially, he was after the royal family. Zawahiri was after Mubarak. Zarqawi was after the Hashemite kingdom and Jews on behalf of Palestinians. Their issues were internal, and they felt if they could get us out of the Middle East, then they could have their way with their own secular leaders. It's a simplified way of looking at it, but it's one way to look at it. So I think when the foreign aid is put in the hands of the military, who aren't trained for foreign aid. I mean, they're not giving out foreign aid to help schools or help build new buildings. They're giving out foreign aid to help build up police, who will then go after people who we don't want running the government. We did it all in the Cold War. The same type of thing, we called it something different.
I guess I would just say, I think one of the things we've learned over the past 20 years is that police are really important. When I was in Russia, then working for the Journal, I'm reminded, sitting next to Jerry, that I left the Journal to go work for Rupert Murdoch at the Weekly Standard. I could have just hung around. It would have been, I got Murdoch anyway.
Don't worry about it.
But one of the things we did in the early days of the collapse of the Soviet Union is we sent over economists. I used to think you could go into a hard currency restaurant in Moscow and you'd come out of the men's room and say, did anybody leave a hard currency or an economic reform plan in the restroom? And everybody at every table would be going, oh, where's my reform plan? Because there were thousands of them. But what they really needed were honest police forces. And I think that aid that can produce, providing they're honest, providing they can control areas, that's an incredibly important use of money, honest authority. I actually wish we had a police force to get rid of Osama bin Laden. The second thing it seems to me we're good at is health foreign aid. It seems to be the health improvements in the world that U.S., Global Fund, and other foreign aid, that's something we have produced measurable results in. The thing we don't seem to be as good at is fomenting economic growth. I saw a study recently, there's really no correlation between foreign aid levels and economic growth. And there are big debates about that. But the stupid, simple thing is to build on the things we're good at, which is police, health, and I think education. And maybe economic foreign aid, we can let the IMF do the best they can. But that just hasn't proven to be as successful.